England versus India. The Cricket Badger Test Match Daily Podcast. Can Joe Root's England dominate on home soil? 5 mouth-watering test matches. Can Virat Kohli's India conquer the final frontier? Loving to talk test cricket every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome along. It's another edition of the Cricket Badger England against India daily podcast. As always, I am James Butler, the Cricket Badger, and as always, I am joined by my fan badgers. And as you can see today, we've got Mark Hilton, Neil Varani, and Naman Shah standing by with their words of wisdom ahead of the Test match that starts tomorrow. Start off, gentlemen, with the new Icc Test Rankings. Joe Root, who I think we've kind of got quite used to scoring centuries all of the time and scoring lots and lots of runs. I watched that little video that was on Twitter the other day of all of his runs in the last innings where he was just knocking it around at will, completely balanced and completely at ease with the world and in control of his batting. And he's moved to number 1, Mark.
Yeah, and deservedly so. I mean, his batting over the last 12 months has been nothing. Well, the stats speak for themselves, don't they, in terms of how many runs he's scored and centuries and so forth. He's made that little change to his technique, and now he looks completely in control every time he goes out to bat. He just looks as though he's got so much time, front foot, back foot. Just caresses the ball. You know, he can rotate the strike at will. A man at the top of his game with the burdens of captaincy, looks as though he hasn't got a care in the world when he's at the crease. So from an England perspective, it's good to see, and let's hope that the slight improvement in the batting last week is replicated this week and they all start kind of thriving and working off the halo of Joe, shall we say. It's great to see.
Bouncing off each other kind of thing.
Nice guy, so he deserves it.
I thought when you said at the top of his game, I thought you were going to describe yourself there, Mark. But I
was at the top of my game.
Naman, I mean, we've talked a lot about Joe Root over the last sort of 6, 8, 12 months or whatever it's been, but he is pretty special at the moment, isn't he?
Yes, 100%. He is at his peak, and I always relate this scenario because somewhere down the line, I feel that England and Joe Root are going through what India has felt during Sachin Tendulkar era. It's like when Sachin goes on to switch off the television, it's kind of a one-man show from Joe Root, and it's been stupendous effort, and he is taking England through every series, and it's like it's not small hundreds, right? It's like 100, 120. He's scoring big, and he wants to do more. And I always have loved the way he approaches the innings. I also saw Sachin Tendulkar's video in that he mentioned that he's a busy player. So I want India to come up with a game plan, but with the kind of form he is in, he's just scoring all around the park, and the way he's nudging the singles and doubles, not only boundaries, it's just terrific to watch, especially for the youngsters coming in England. They should see how he's doing it for England and take it from there.
That's the key to me now, man. The way he just nudges the ones and gets himself down the other end and keeps that scoreboard ticking. And Neil, I saw his interview probably about 3 centuries ago now, where he was talking about sitting down with Jack Callis in the winter, and Jack Callis has said the first century is for the taxman, the second century is for you, the other runs are for you, kind of thing. And he described himself as a tight Yorkshireman, and he's taken that to heart. But it is that hunger for runs, isn't it? As a batsman, you need that. You need to basically get to 60 and not be content with that. Turn it into 3 figures, turn it into 150, turn it into 200 if you can.
Yeah, and he started to do that. I always thought the difference between Smith and Kohli compared to just about everyone else was that there was an acknowledgement when they got a century, but usually there wasn't a massive celebration because when they were at their peak, they didn't see that as the end game. 150 was what you're aiming for as your benchmark, and I think Root this year has reached those kind of levels of Kohli 2016 or Smith 2015, and then again in 2019, where he isn't ever satisfied. There's a famous stat that the number of wickets in terms of how many runs a batsman scored, it spikes massively at just over 100, because a lot of players have that little bit of relaxation. Their concentration goes a little bit after they've scored a century, and you see a lot of people getting out between 101 and 110. Root at the moment looks like he'll acknowledge and he'll celebrate a century, but he won't let that concentration waver, because he wants the, as Gooch had called them, the daddy hundreds, and that's when he feels that he's actually achieved, which is absolutely brilliant to see.
And Mark, you see batsmen, even Joe Root has his fallow periods. With Joe Root, though, it's averaging sort of 33 rather than 59, isn't it, when he has a fallow period? But which most other English batsmen would actually probably take as a career at the moment. But you've got to make it count. When you're in form like he is at the moment, you know that maybe this time next year you might be having a bit of a Virat Kohli trot where it's a struggle. While it's happening like it is doing for Joe, he just needs to fill his boots, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does, because if you remember, he had that period where he wasn't converting, he was getting to 50 a lot, and there was a lot of talk about him not converting enough and so forth. He's made that slight adjustment to his technique in terms of, rather than going back and across, he's just going slightly. He's not as exaggerated in his move, in his trigger movement. And yeah, he does need to, because it won't last forever. Although when you look at him back, at the moment, it's very difficult to bowl to him. I mean, India have a good bowling side, very good bowling side, and I think Kohli's tried everything with him, tried different fields, but nothing seemed. Every bowler seems to come the same to him. But yeah, he's filling his boots, and I mean, what's impressive is, we've said it a lot of times, he's got a lot of pressure as captain of England, particularly in the series that are coming up, India, Australia, particularly about all the debate about red ball cricket and players not getting practice. He's had a lot of that to cope with. We've had, the white ball cricketers being seen as more, bright ball cricket as being prioritised. He's had to put up with that as captain. He's also had to put up with, other batters not coming off and always having the pressure on him, and captaining as well. And, you shouldn't trivialise it. He's also got a family and 2 young children, so, and he's only 30 odd years of age. So he's had a huge amount of pressure on him on his shoulders in the last 12 months. And to perform the way he has done is above excellent, really, in that situation. I mean, it is, Graham Gooch did it for a while, but he was much older than Joe Root and had a lot more experience. But Joe Root is really ploughing his own furrow at the moment. I think England should be really proud of him. And I think, he obviously he's not going to score 100 every time he goes out to bat, but you just feel at the moment the form could continue for a long time, just because he looks so comfortable with every form of bowling. All right, he might not get 100 every time, but you can imagine him averaging over 50 over the next 2 or 3 years without any problem whatsoever, even with the burden of captaincy.
I think the nappy factor is a big thing, though. Sometimes with batsmen, you kind of get a bit of a family, you get the kids, and it kind of relaxes you. You realise that maybe cricket's not quite as important as you once thought it was. And he probably half the time thinks he's a single bloke because he's never at home, is he? And never sees his family. He only sees them on Skype.
He's probably on Skype and Zoom like us every night. We probably see more of each other than he does of his kids, probably. But yeah, I think when you get kids out, sometimes it gives you a perspective and so forth. And he seems to me as a guy who does have quite a lot of perspective. He doesn't get too high or low.
Mark's just frozen for a second. I'll come on to Naman, because I was going to ask Naman a question. Vasant's been in touch. He says he thinks that Ashwin is the answer to get rid of Joe Root. He's the answer for India. Do you see that, Naman? Do you think that Ashwin can come in and cause Root a few more problems than maybe he's faced so far in this series?
For sure, with the kind of form he is in right now, when he not only in India, he has taken wickets away from home as well, and he knows the conditions of England. He has played county cricket, and for sure, the presence of Ashwin will also give confidence to the other premier bowlers, the likes of Shami, Bumrah, So his important, presence is much more important, and it will also give Jadeja a bit of company. Those spinners have to do a lot of work in this last three matches. They haven't much taken wickets, but surely in London Oval, if you will see the records like of Moeen Ali, then Keshav Maharaj, Jack Leach, everyone has picked up wickets in the second inning. So for sure, the impact of Ashwin will be there, and he has loads of variation in his books. So it will be a super battle to watch the route between the swings.
Vasant's been in touch, and it might surprise you watching this, but we do actually discuss it sometimes before we press live. And Neil brought this actually up as a discussion point today. Vasant's saying that he thinks suddenly calling Prasid into the squad's a bit baffling, he says. Plus, I think Ashwin and Jadeja might play, plus Shami, Siraj and Bumrah. But I'd agree with that selection there. But the call-up of Prasid?
I'm wondering if they do play.
Mark doesn't want to listen to you, does he? Mark's gone.
If they do play Bumrah, Shami, and Siraj, then that's four bowlers who have played 4 tests with a small break in between 2 and 3. And if Ishant, I'm wondering whether there is a niggle with Ishant. You know, he's getting on a little bit, not quite as much as Jimmy, but you know, he's been on the circuit for 14 years. He's a tall, slightly gangly guy, and the way that he bowled, his pace was down, and he was also off, and that's not something you associate with him. So I'm wondering if there's something going on there. In which case, it's a bit of insurance. If you've got 3 guys who've gone through 4 tests bowling a lot due to Joe Root, then when you get to Manchester, there's a possibility that 1 or 2 of them may pick up something. So bring him into the group, get him in the nets, bowling to our batters so that he's getting himself up to speed. And that way, if we do need it, I mean, we saw what happened in Australia where people were dropping left, right, and centre, either through just standard injuries or getting taken to pieces by Pat Cummins.
In Australia, if you'd ever spoken to an Indian and you were in Australia at the time, you stood a chance of a call-up, didn't you? Because they got down to the bare bones, didn't they? Nah, man. I mean, one of the things with this, the Joe Root factor and him batting so long, as Neil just indicated there, is putting overs into the legs of the Indian bowlers, isn't it? They've had some long spells to bowl.
Yes, a lot, and also taking India-England series at home as well, and also WTC Championship. So it's a marathon run for the bowlers, and you have such a long series in play. So you have to also check out after the fitness of the bowlers. And in a way, I was happy that we did not have to bowl in the third test match. We lost that by an inning, so it gave us some kind of rest to our bowlers as well in the third test match. So that was the biggest positive for India. So yes, I feel that there will be rotation somewhere, as Neil is rightly mentioned. Maybe I feel that Siraj or Shami might be rested, or maybe any of one bowler, and might be they would go with sheer pace with kind of Umesh Yadav, and if they want to bolster the batting as well, so maybe make use of Shardul Thakur. But yes, Joe Root has taken a toll of Indian bowlers. He is at his peak, and it's not easy, right? Just traveling all over the world and keep bowling like this, and they have made India win. Both batsmen are not at their best, but bowlers are doing it for India, so it says a lot.
I was doing a preview yesterday, writing a preview, and looking at the last time India were at the Oval. Lost reasonably heavily in the end. It was Icc Cook's farewell game, wasn't it, where he got a big century in the second innings to say goodbye to international cricket. But Jadeja got wickets and runs in that match, so he'll have fond memories to take back to London with him. Got a question from Ted on the tweets here. I'll give this one to Mark first. Do you think Moeen Ali should be vice captain? It's been announced that he's been going to be vice captain for the 4th Test match alongside Joe Root. And he also adds on something we've already talked about, actually. But the only thing that surprises me about Root being number one in the rankings is the calculation hasn't got him there sooner, because he's been number one for some time. But in terms of Moeen Ali, reasonable decision, Mark, isn't it, to have him as the right-hand man to Joe Root in this test?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Moeen's also got some captaincy experience from the Blast and the 100 and playing for Worcester. He's a senior player. He's played a lot of test matches. He's also a good thinker on the game. Very calm in the field. Players respect him. Who are the alternatives? Rory Burns. I think he's got enough to think about in the batting. Bairstow's got the gloves. I think obviously Moeen Ali. He's a senior player and he's well respected within the group. And I think if anything happens to Root on the field, there'd be no issue with Ali taking over, or if Root got injured and Ali has to captain the last test match. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because not too long ago we talked about, and we talk about with a lot of players, that Moeen Ali had played his last test match and he was out in the cold, and he'd been snubbed by Root and Silverwood in India because of what they said about him having his break and so forth. And then, hey presto, here we are, literally 7-8 months later, he's reintegrated into the side, a central cog, apparently the number one spinner again, and now he's vice captain. So it shows in sport how things, can turn very quickly, and it shows in particular with the England cricket side. We should never say that someone's, they're saying it about Josh Butler at the moment as he played his last test match. I think history has shown over the last 12 months or so, 18 months, never ever to say that. And I'm really pleased for him.
He's just getting to a good point, and then he freezes on us. Neil, I mean, what Mark's saying there about, I mean, it's kind of that phrase, a week's a long time in politics. A series is a long time in cricket, isn't it? You can be the forgotten man, and by the fourth or fifth test match, you're back in again.
A week is a very long time in both English and Indian cricket, as we've seen with how people are referring to both teams and players in those teams as well, in between Lords and Headingley. Look, I think people are taking too much importance from this appointment. This is only a temporary thing until Ben Stokes feels right to come back. So it's not actually showing any true permanence of players' positions. Rory Burns, before this series, was only penciled in on that team sheet due to the inadequacies of his opening partners, whoever they may be. Moeen Ali has been out the test team for the best part of 2 years, and has been brought in ahead of two incumbent spinners to get into the team. I certainly wouldn't say that his position is a strong one at the moment in that squad. If you're putting it to the players who are always going to play, then you've really only got Root and Anderson, haven't you? We all know that
at the start of the series, Neil, when I was comparing the two squads, or the two likely starting 11s, I was making the point that you look down India's 11, it looks pretty settled. You might get the odd change here and there, but it's pretty settled. There's ticks all the way down. Some of those ticks might be a little bit fainter after Jimmy Anderson, but they're still there as ticks. Whereas with England, there's more question marks, aren't there? There's Jimmy, as you say, and there's Joe. But apart from that,
yeah, and now off the back of 4 tests, Ollie Robinson as well, I think, has actually got his name on the team sheet ahead of Stuart Broad, just based on performances. But
and in the fact he's got 2 legs.
Yeah, I've seen some of Stuart's videos on Instagram. He appears to be on the mend, but the fact that he's in a wheelchair means that it might be a bit of time.
I bet he could still bowl Australia out, in the wheelchair.
Yeah, I still wouldn't want to face him. He'd still be able to bounce me out the game. But it's like when we talked about Johnny making number 5 his own. It's a temporary position. As soon as Ben Stokes is ready physically and mentally to come back, then he will be vice captain and he will be number 5 in the Test team. As far as Root's rise to number 1, well, it's a purely statistical calculation. Root has been the best player on a rolling 2-year basis. I think they calculate it pretty much in the same way as the tennis rankings, where it's his performances weighted slightly for the strength of opposition over the last 2 years. And last year wasn't bad. This year has just been unbelievable. So not surprising that he's number 1. What has surprised me is the consistency that Joe's shown this year in putting together big scores. Before this series started, and certainly before this year started, Joe was on 17 centuries with a conversion rate of somewhere around 20%. I think he had maybe 70 50s to his 17 centuries, whereas Virat had 27 centuries to 26 50s. And that was the big thing about Joe, that he'd get to 50 before you knew it, and then he'd be out before you knew it. But this year he's completely just flipped that conversion rate on its head.
He's got the Sheffield Steel inside him, isn't he? He's got the Sheffield Steel inside him now. Let's move on to another question here. I hope I've pronounced this right. Shai Manju. He's said Naman. I mean, let's start before I ask Shai's question. This Jos Buttler's obviously gone on paternity leave. Like, he's going to miss the 4th Test match, possibly the 5th as well. Then who knows what's going to happen with the Ashes this winter. This is a big opportunity for Johnny Bairstow. Got the gloves back. We know that's what Johnny Bairstow wants, to be the wicketkeeper batsman. It's a big opportunity, certainly over at the Oval and at Old Trafford, to actually show what he can do and remind people what he can do, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. And adding more responsibility to the adding his wicket keeping as well, he'll feel more responsible. And to be honest, he had that opportunity in the 3rd Test match as well. And the most positive thing which I feel right now for Bairstow is Root is going well. So he does not need to worry about anything else. He just needs to stay there, as he played nicely in the 2nd Test match. So he has Root's confidence in him, and so he can use that and stay it as long as possible. And it is only going to help him. But maybe, as we had discussed earlier as well, like Butler, Bairstow are somewhere in a mid of mindset whether to go berserk for every delivery or maybe defend and then start slowly. So this white ball cricketer has this kind of a mindset come. So I feel slowly he'll be scoring runs, but yes, definitely 100%. This is the best opportunity Bairstow can get in the absence of Butler. He can feel the spot. Even after, as Neil mentioned, Stokes comes, Bairstow will stay. And just imagine the middle order with Stokes, Bairstow, and Root. This is going to be a great for England going into the Ashes.
Right, now I'm going to ask you Shai's question now, and I'm going to watch Neil's face as I ask this. Shai basically says, is England's middle order looking weak in the absence of Jos Buttler?
You think that to me, or
No, that's to Naman, but I just waited to see Neil's face when I asked that, and the laugh that you can hear, listeners and viewers, is probably tells you. But do you think it weakens the middle order, Naman?
No, not at all. To be honest, I don't want to be rude also, but I feel this is blessing in disguise for England as well, and it's good for Butler. I always wish him good for white ball cricket, but I simply feel that he's not made right now for red ball cricket, and England have enough challenge with more wicket keepers who are doing good in county cricket. Maybe an opportunity for those guys as well, but kind of Daniel Lawrence, and they could be brutal, and he could also bring in some spin on this turning deck. So I feel not at all it's going to be weak at all.
Jos Buttler, Mark, he's having this baby at about the right time, isn't he? Missing the 4th and 5th Test match, then the sort of kind of uncertainty, shall we say, about the Ashes this winter. It kind of takes people off the scent that he's actually played quite poorly over the last 4 or 5 Test matches.
We're having the debate again about Butler, aren't we? It's round and round. I know you like.
Shai's fault. He's asked the question.
Yeah, I mean, it might take people off the scent a little bit in terms of But he missed Test matches in India, and I know he did well in England at the end, but so he's missed Test matches before and come back. I think with Butler, we keep going on about his performances, but if you actually look over time, as we've said a lot of the time, he's averaging about 34, 35. As a number 7 batsman keeper, that's okay. He's never going to be Adam Gilchrist. And I think with him, they see him. I mean, again, they talk a lot about the culture of the team and having the right culture and the right professionalism and the right people in it. And they see him as part of that inner group, whether you like it or not. And that's reflected in the fact that every time he goes out, he comes back in. And Root even said yesterday, he was the first one to say, this is not the end of Josh Butler's career. They value him highly as an individual. I think his wicket keeping has improved immeasurably over the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, he's worked very hard. Yeah, worked very hard on it.
Keeping. I don't think if people are ever going to expect that Josh Butler's going to be the next Alan Gilchrist, you can forget about that because Gilchrist.
Well, nobody is, are they? There is only one Adam Gilchrist.
Yeah,
he set the bar so high.
He's saying, well, why can't he bat like Adam Gilchrist? Why he's got all this white ball stuff and all the rest of it? I mean, in red ball cricket, he's only got 7 centuries over his career. He averages 33. Right, that's what he's going to be, and he's either going to be 7 as a batsman, and you accept that as a batter keeper, or you jettison him. At the moment, they're keeping him, and I think if he wants to go to Australia, they will take him to Australia as a keeper with Bairstow, and let him fight it out. So I don't think it's the end of his Test career. It puts people off the scent for sure, but as I say, they look at things over the longer period, don't they? They look at last summer when he got the runs against the West Indies. They look at match-winning performances he's put in. They don't just look at it over 2 Test matches. They might say, well, let's have a look at Lords. He batted a long time there and nearly saved us the game. So they have different ways of looking at things, don't they, as a group? But yeah, it puts people off the scent. We go around and have the debate yet again because we've got these keeper batsmen. And if Bairstow does well and gets a ton or gets a lot of runs, then I can see him keeping the gloves on merit. But Butler will come back into the reckoning at some point.
I'm not going to go to Neil because we've heard from Neil on this subject, as you've heard from me on this subject in the recent past too. But Shai also asks, who replaces Butler? I mean, obviously Bairstow's taking the gloves, but it means there's an opening in the batting lineup for. I mean, it looks like a straight shootout, doesn't it, between Ollie Pope and Dan Lawrence? Quick answers, gentlemen. Neil, who are you going to pick between Pope and Lawrence?
As an India fan or an England fan?
As a cricket fan.
Lawrence. I think Pope, for all his the beauty of his work, doesn't have that same steel, and quite frankly, he looks an absolute shambles all throughout the India tour, and a bit before that as well. I think he's got a bit of work to do before he becomes the new Ian Bell. Whereas Lawrence, while being a bit idiosyncratic, a little bit ugly, he's putting runs on the board. I think 350s in the short time that he's been there, in tough circumstances as well. Lawrence deserves the spot, but there is that romance with Pope, and he's got a ridiculous average against county bowlers at the Oval. So should be Lawrence, will be Pope. That's
Neil's version of a short answer. Naman, what about you, Pope or Lawrence?
More than deserving, I feel both are just good batsmen. I am a huge fan of Pope as well, but owing to the conditions what we are getting in Oval, and Lawrence bringing his spinning options as well, and it will only make add options for Root as well going into the second innings when the cracks are going to open and it will start turning. So nothing related to any confidence perspective or the rankings or the average or statistics. More so adding to the team balance, I'll go with Dan Lawrence. I feel he'll add more cushion to that middle order, and he's an aggressive player. He scored 80 around in Sri Lanka as well. So he's good against spinners compared to Pope. So if 2 spinners India is playing, Ashwin and Jadeja, so I feel over there Lawrence will be more a confident player if compared to Pope.
You don't do short answers, you guys, do you? Mark, Lawrence or Pope?
I'm going for Pope. I think they'll pick Pope. I think they should pick Pope. I think for me, over the long term, I can see Pope getting runs in Test match cricket and getting lots of them. I just can't have Lawrence's technique. I can't have his technique on a long-term basis. So I hope they pick Pope because I think Pope has got a long-term future in Test match cricket. I'm not so sure about Glenn Cross.
I find it very difficult, that selection, because I really like both. It's like picking between your children or something, isn't it? You kind of you love them both and you want them both to succeed, and there's only one place. I just think on recent form, Dan Lawrence looks to have is better equipped mentally, I think, for Test cricket at the moment. Pope's got like a ceiling of 22, looks really nice, and then gets out, doesn't he? And he does that very regularly. And I think somehow whoever mentioned the term switch, there's a switch inside Ollie Pope's head that if you turn it, then all of a sudden those 22s turn into 60s, 80s, 150s, and he's away. And he just needs that switch flicking. I want to finish off with a subject that I've been thinking about during this series. Somebody mentioned it to me on Twitter, and I kind of thought about it, and I thought, actually, that's quite a good point. Obviously, all of the test teams have analysts, and they've got their own research and what have you on the techniques, etc., of the opposition. But somebody said to me when England were doing badly, this was, by the way, Sky dissect everybody's techniques. The TV screens are in the dressing rooms of the opposition sides, and the coaches can sit there watching all of the Nasser Hussains and Mike Athertons of this world dissecting a Dom Sibley's technique, and they're making notes in the Indian dressing room, working it out, Neil. That it does seem to be, they seem to be more harsh on the English in the Sky, because it's an English broadcast, than the Indian techniques. And do you think that actually plays into the hands of the opposition? Is it like having another 2 or 3 coaches that are there analysing for you?
I don't think it's as much of an issue in that they're not talking to the players at the same time. I know there was a big controversy in the Big Bash where they speak to players while they're on the field, and one of the commentators said, "Oh yeah, by the way, the lad who's just come in, did you know that this bowler that you've got averages like a wicket every 5 balls against him? All right, well, I'll put him on next over then." I think that would be an issue when you're actively involved in the game. But if Sky are doing that, then considering the amount of analysis that's in the game anyway, both on England and India's side, then all it is another person shouting out. It's another Indian journalist telling Virat Kohli how to score off the back foot, because Virat obviously has never done that in his 8,000 runs.
There's a slight difference, because you can think, oh, that's another article by Fred Smith. He's just always going on about my back foot selection, so I'm going to put that to one side. Whereas they actually sit there on the balcony with the earphone on, listening to Hussain and Atherton all day long, don't they?
Yes, but it doesn't go straight out to the players on the pitch. And yeah, it's mainlined into the team dressing room, but it's not something that they don't get in any case. In Test matches, I don't think the effect is quite as immediate or quite as stark. You know, if they were doing the South Africa in '99, sort of the Hansie Cronje earpiece thing, then it might be more of an issue. But also the stuff that England
bowling coach's numbers.
Yeah, that was very weird. It's bizarre that 20 years on, we've actually gone backwards in the technology that we're using for
I thought they'd stopped him doing that, and there was a bit of controversy at the time. And then I saw in the recent one-day series, he was back doing it again.
Nathan Lehman. No. I think that was actually fine because they'd checked it beforehand. They did it in the PSL, he said, and then they did it with the England match. And there's no actual instruction for Owen Morgan to take it. It's more like additional information. And in the end, it's just a faster way of doing it than having the guy bringing the water on, telling people to do things. So I don't have an issue with it. I don't have an issue with the South Africans in '99 doing it either. We're getting to that stage as well. I mean, it is quite interesting, but I don't think there's any major effect there. And I think actually Sky compared to a lot of broadcasters that I've seen, are reasonably neutral.
Well, I was going to say that to Naman, because watching the series in India this winter, obviously in the UK we had people in the studio in the UK, Alistair Cook, etc., talking about the game over in India, but we had the hosts, broadcasters commentary, and that was quite an eye opener for me, Naman, because they were very pro-Indian. I didn't think, and it was almost to the extent of if there was any chance to be critical of India, they didn't take it because it was almost like policy not to be critical of Team India. Whereas Sky and kind of English journalists are very quick to put the boot in if they think it's appropriate. India don't seem to do that. They seem to be kind of, they walk the line the BCCI paint for them.
Nothing like that. To be honest, the home team, wherever the side is playing, they'll always feel that their supporters and their commentators and analysts are always biased. Like they do not praise their own cricketers. And to be honest, we have also felt that we have gone through when India, I guess, had gone to Bangladesh, and this happened with Harsha Bogle, if I'm not wrong. Like many celebs and came out bashing him that he's not praising Indian players and the bowlers, and he's just praising the opposition. And I guess it also happened with Sanjay Manjrekar as well. So it's not that it's happening in one country, and it's just a psychological thing. And because you always think whenever your side is losing, you always end up hearing all the negative like comments or analysts or like a Nasser explaining the batsman like Sibley how if he's going to score 100 with that technique, he's not going to explain him how to bat. Only if a side is losing, the analyst will come. And right now, Kohli, including me, are explaining Kohli that he needs to play on the back foot. But if he scores a ton tomorrow, everything is gone. So it's like when a team
if he scores a ton tomorrow, Naman, you're going to take credit, aren't you, because of your little diagram on Twitter? It's going to be all down to Naman Shah that Kohli's found his form again. Mark, in terms of the what we're talking about there in sort of the broadcasters and what they say, and kind of bouncing off what Neil's saying there about having earpieces on the pit, it's only an extension of where we're going, isn't it? That in, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, whenever it's going to be, we'll actually be able to hear what the coaches are telling the captain on the pitch.
I hope it doesn't, because I think, the captain should be in control, and it takes away the spontaneity of the game. And you see it in all sports, don't you? This urge to control absolutely every piece of play, and this urge to kind of, if you like, make things so important that everything's got to be controlled. We can't have any spontaneity because this sport is so important. It's so important. There's all this money involved, so we've got to control it all. It's like VAR, it's like all forms of technology. And yes, technology is useful, but I would hate to think that we lose that spontaneity, that we have a coach with somebody in the ear telling the captain what to do, and where do we go? Get bowlers in their ears and this, that, and the other. People out there should be making their decisions, making their own decisions. They're adults, whether that's male cricketers or female cricketers, and you have a captain on the pitch to, marshal the troops, so to speak, and make those strategic decisions.
I think to be honest, Mark, the thing that'll stop it is the captains themselves will say, I don't want him in my ear. I'll get enough of him in the hotel over the weekend.
Like we were saying about the broadcasters, and are the Indians influenced? There's so much noise everywhere. There's noise everywhere. Social media, broadcasters. There's that much noise everywhere that I think people just hear what they want to hear anyway. They block it out.
Yeah, I really can't see Virat Kohli wanting an earpiece with Ravi Shastri talking about him.
I think I'm at work or I need earpiece to the boss, and with the boss saying to me, "Hey, I've just seen."
You don't need an earpiece with Ravi Shastri.
Yeah.
You can hear him just shouting from the balcony.
All you have to do with Ravi Shastri is look at him on the balcony to know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
So, he's one of the most kind of openly kind of emotive guys you can see in terms of that. You can see his emotions.
Last question.
Loudest man.
Last question in this podcast, Neil. Naman kind of dead batted from an Indian perspective the neutrality of the host broadcaster in India. From an Indian perspective, living in England, do you see it slightly differently?
Oh, completely. The BCCI employ the commentators, and Michael Holding has gone on record is saying he won't sign to work with the BCCI in India because of the restrictions they put into place. Now, the BCCI are not the only people who do this. During the last World Cup in England, Mikey went nuts when the ICC tried to tell commentators not to have a go at the umpires for bad decisions. There was a form of censorship there, and quite honestly, I think if other boards had the financial might to do that, then they would. I think with Sky in England, there's a difference there. I think Sky hold the whip hand, and they won't accept editorializing from the ECB. But at the same time, you definitely see that certain commentators have their favourites who don't come in for as much.
Oh, Neil's done a mark. I'm just going to run through some of the messages before we say goodbye. Shai's been back on saying Monty Panesar tweeting about how to get Root out, but not a tweet about how England should play spin. So basically suggesting Monty's helping the Indians there covertly. Well, not covertly because he's on Twitter. So it's quite public. And Amit saying, I'd be more than delighted to trade off Sanju Manju and Murali Kartik for Nasser and Atherton on the Indian commentary. So there's a difference of opinions there. And we've all got our favourite commentators, like we have all got our favourite players, haven't we? And yeah, we're no different. We're no different. Can't wait for the test match, fellas, to start tomorrow. One apiece in the series, 2 test matches to play. The Oval, the scene over the next 5 days, hopefully, if the weather stays fit and the batsmen actually do their job and take us all the way through to day number 5. It will be very interesting to see how this one pans out. Will Virat Kohli find form? Can Joe Root continue to do what he does? Will Jimmy Anderson get rested? Loads of questions to be answered tomorrow morning and beyond. Thank you to Namant, to Neil and to Mark for joining me on the podcast today. And make sure you join us again tomorrow because we'll come back after day number 1 and we'll see you then. Cheers, everybody.